Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly forgotten why you went there? One moment, you have a clear purpose in mind. Maybe you're heading to the kitchen for a glass of water, looking for your phone charger, or planning to tell someone something important. Everything feels perfectly clear. Then, the moment you step through the doorway, your mind goes completely blank. You stop and look around. Why did I come here? Almost everyone has experienced this strange moment at least once. Some people experience it several times a week. It can feel frustrating, confusing, and even a little worrying. Many people wonder whether it means their memory is getting worse or if something is wrong with their brain. But here's the surprising truth. This experience is completely normal. In fact, scientists have discovered that forgetting your purpose after walking through a doorway reveals something remarkable about how the human mind works. This phenomenon is known as the doorway effect. At first glance, memory seems simple. Most people imagine the brain as a giant storage room where information is placed and retrieved whenever needed. According to this idea, memories should remain easily accessible until we choose to forget them. However, the human brain doesn't work like a storage box. Instead, your brain constantly organizes experiences into separate mental chapters. Think about your favorite movie. A movie isn't one endless scene. It's divided into different locations, events, and moments that help the story make sense. Your brain does something very similar. Every environment becomes its own chapter in your mind. Your bedroom is one chapter, your kitchen is another. Your workplace, classroom, living room, and even your car each become separate sections in your mental story. Without realizing it, your brain is constantly sorting information based on where you are and what is happening around you. This system helps you make sense of an incredibly complicated world. Imagine if every experience from your entire life existed as one giant, uninterrupted stream. Finding specific information would be almost impossible. Instead, your brain creates boundaries between events, allowing memories to stay organized and easier to process. Scientists call these divisions event boundaries. An event boundary occurs whenever your brain decides that one experience has ended and another has begun. Walking through a doorway is one of the strongest event boundaries we encounter every day. The moment you enter a new room, your brain unconsciously recognizes that the environment has changed. The lighting may be different, the sounds may be different, the objects around you are different, even the expectations for what might happen next are different. As a result, your brain begins preparing for the new environment. It shifts attention toward the present moment and starts organizing information into a brand new chapter. Most of the time, this process happens so quickly that we never notice it. But occasionally, something interesting occurs. The thought you were carrying moments earlier becomes harder to access, not because it disappeared, not because your memory failed, but because your brain quietly turned the page and started focusing on a new chapter of reality. To understand why this happens, scientists decided to investigate the doorway effect in a controlled environment. Researchers wondered whether doorways themselves were somehow responsible for these memory lapses, or whether something deeper was happening inside the brain. One of the most famous experiments was conducted by psychologists who created a virtual environment consisting of multiple rooms connected by doorways. Participants were given simple tasks. They would pick up objects, carry them across rooms, and remember information while moving through the virtual space. At first, the task seemed easy. The participants could clearly remember the object they were carrying and the instructions they had been given. However, something unexpected happened when they crossed from one room into another. The moment they passed through a doorway, their memory performance dropped. People who remained in the same room remembered information more accurately, but those who walked through doorways were significantly more likely to forget what they were holding in mind. The doorway itself wasn't magical. Nothing about the physical frame caused memory loss. Instead, the change in environment triggered the brain to reorganize information. The researchers concluded that crossing an event boundary makes previously active thoughts less accessible. The information isn't erased. It's simply pushed into the background while the brain focuses on processing the new environment. Think of your brain like a computer running multiple programs at once. Right now, your mind is constantly handling dozens of different tasks. You're processing sounds, sights, emotions, memories, and thoughts all at the same time. To manage this enormous amount of information, the brain relies on something called working memory. Working memory acts like a mental workspace. It's the place where information is temporarily stored while you're actively using it. When you remember a phone number long enough to dial it or keep track of directions while driving, you're using working memory. But there's a problem. Working memory is extremely limited. Scientists estimate that it can only hold a small amount of information at any given moment. Because of this limitation, your brain must constantly decide what deserves attention and what can be temporarily set aside. When you walk into a new room, your brain suddenly receives a flood of fresh information. New colors, new objects, new sounds, new possibilities. Your attention automatically shifts toward these details because your brain assumes they might be important. As this happens, the thought you were previously holding, perhaps grabbing a drink or finding your charger, can lose priority. The memory doesn't disappear. It's still stored somewhere in your mind. However, it becomes harder to retrieve because your brain has redirected its resources toward processing the new environment. This explains why many people suddenly remember their original purpose the moment they walk back into the previous room. Returning to the earlier environment recreates the same context in which the memory was formed. The brain reconnects with that mental chapter, making the forgotten thought easier to access again. You may have experienced this yourself. You walk into the kitchen and completely forget why you're there. After standing around confused for several seconds, you return to your bedroom. Almost instantly, the answer pops back into your mind.